What's good, women's basketball fans? We are coming to you a few days removed from the 2024 WNBA Draft, and we are going to have some insights here. But I'm going to tell you what, Misha, and we should be hearing from Brian later on the show. The one thing, not the one thing, there are a lot of things, but I think the one thing that's going underrated about this draft, and perhaps this draft class from a New York Liberty perspective, is there's about to be so much heat taking off Sabrina Ionescu. We're going to talk about that and more coming up on today's episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. All right, women's basketball fans, welcome to another episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. I am Erica L. Ayala here alongside Misha Jones. And like I mentioned, we are going to talk about the 2024 WNBA Draft. We also, of course, are going to do our shoot-around stories around women's basketball. Oh, man, there are lots.
Plenty.
Stories aplenty. Stories aplenty. But Misha, before we get into that, let's do a tap in. How you feeling? What's good with you?
Things are good, Erica. Things are good. As everybody who watches regularly knows now, that podcast I've been working on, we are chugging along, throwing out episodes every week. We had Tamika Catchings this week on Wednesday. We had LaTyna Robinson last week. We had Steph White a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to tell y'all, tap in with ways to win. It's only going to go up from here. That's it. That's all.
Love that. And for me, I was at the draft. Had a little station with CBS Sports, so we have some content up on cbssports.com, and we should have more. It was a really interesting draft in a lot of ways, and I'll get into that a little bit today. I know Brian Florentin was also there, and he and I actually had very different experiences, and again, we could talk about that, but we are definitely going to get into on this episode, Misha, what this draft means from the New York Liberty perspective. Of course, there are a lot of opinions, as is the case with everything, and we'll get into that, some of the asinine things in the shoot around. But also, I had a chance while I was in New York. I stayed in New York a few extra days. I stayed back home because Team USA had a media summit. So this is all of the governing bodies that will represent the United States in the Olympics. So USA Basketball, USA Gymnastics, and on and on and on. All these federations kind of fall under the Team USA umbrella, or the USOPC, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And we got to hear from some athletes. And the player that represented women's basketball was our very own Breanna Stewart. So we actually have a clip from that interview. I got to ask a few questions of Stewie. She talked about a lot of cool things. And then the full presser, you'll have access to on Black Rosie Media. I believe it's uploading right now. So by the time we end this live, it should be ready. But all right, let's get into this shoot around here. We have, a few things. I talked about it just a moment ago, but we are less than 100 days. Wednesday marked 100 days exactly from the Paris Olympics, and the men's team 5-on-5 was dropped. That actually came out, I think it was either the day before or the day of the summit, the panel, and Grant Hill talking about. So we kind of knew this, right, Misha, that the NBA players wanted back in, maybe throwing a little bit of shade to some of the amateurs that represented the United States in the last handful of international tournaments. So I thought that was interesting. But again, got to hear from Stewie. We also got some Nike Rebel jersey reveals. Now, I thought this was interesting, Misha, because you remember, I guess it was it in the bubble or coming out of the bubble? But we had the whole league had these Rebel jerseys, and it's hey, there we go, on display. On display. We got a different angle today.
The sun was going down. All right. Don't go on me. Don't go on me. The sun was going down. The lighting was good.
Okay. Had to catch the light.
Move the computer down. But yeah.
Had to catch the light. I respect it. Okay, there we go. That's what we're used to. It's just we're all familiar. We're familiar with your background now.
I know you missed the plants. I'm so sorry. I know there's a lot of
yes. But yeah, I think it's interesting that I don't know if all teams are gonna have these Nike Rebel jerseys. Like, what's happening with that?
Only, I believe, 5 or 6 teams. This is the second installation because last year they had a few teams get new ones. I believe it's 5 or 6 teams this season that got them. The Storm, the Sparks, the Sun. You look it up if you haven't seen it yet. Okay.
The Sun, that black. I have the blue. You don't like it? I like a black jersey. I'm not gonna
I love a black jersey, but I need it to have more character, and it just doesn't have enough character for me. It looks exactly the same as
the blue one.
the blue one, and I just need it for things to change. I have thoughts, generally speaking, on the jersey, but I want you to
I just like that it's black, and I feel you. I was kind of like, oh, you just kind of swap the color out, but I think the history that's represented in that design and the Mohegan people, like, I love that. So I was like, oh, I get it in black now. Yep, copping that. So yes. Hey, Daryl, thank you for the super chat. Yeah, we trying to get this show monetized. This channel. Let's go. Thank you. But yeah. We love it. Stewie for another MVP. Hope Asia Wilson doesn't get upset. See, okay, wait a minute now. And it's interesting.
Not even gonna make us these scapegoats for this situation. You're not finna do it.
Well, you know what? Let's come back to this, Daryl and everybody else, because Stewie kind of hit on some things again at the media summit, and I have a little clip for y'all, so we're going to talk about it. Hey, JC, what's good? Not pleased at Nika Mule. I guess you mean not being drafted. Yeah, Nika did not go to the New York Liberty. Charisma did not go to New York Liberty. We'll talk about that. But anyway, so let's go into some other stuff. Speaking of, okay, the madness. The madness. What do we mean by the madness? We are not in March, but the madness goes on. There are so many people now with WNBA opinions. It's wild to me because the opinions, broadly speaking, I think we can all say that broadly speaking, people who didn't watch, I'll be generous and say 5 WNBA games. Let's even be more generous and say annually they watch 5 or less games. Now, whether that number is the same as their lifetime numbers, I'm gonna let y'all decide how y'all feel about that. But let's just say someone who watches 5 or less games, WNBA games, having opinions. Well, why are they asking for more money? Why this? Why that? Da, 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 da. Now we have that same kind of crop of people on social media doing the exact opposite, asking, well, why aren't they making more money? And I'm like, wow, okay, like, does this mean that we have arrived? I don't understand. And then talking about Asia Wilson, like, how does Asia always find herself in the position? It's wild to me that Asia's always the player that people talk about, that she's not marketable enough, but she's always the if I'm being blunt, the black player that people pit up against whoever the white player is. So it's been Stewie, it's been Sabrina, and now I guess it's Caitlin Clark. And what's also wild to me is I guess this is an MNBA thing where they're like, oh, well, centers don't move shoes, so that's she doesn't have a shoe because she's a center. Lisa Leslie had a shoe. Candace Parker had a shoe. And last time I checked, I'm 5'5.5" on a good day. And I don't care. Like, all of these players are taller than me. So what does it matter? Like, what do centers? I'm going to ask you a real question here, Misha, because maybe it's my ignorance. But do centers wear specifically different shoes than all the other hoopers? Like, let me know the science behind this.
There's no science. It is nonsense. It is psychobabble. None of it makes sense. I think the precedent that maybe people are speaking to might be for the NBA. That ain't got nothing to do with us over here. Ain't got nothing to do with us over here. And frankly, the issue is people are refusing to shut the F up and listen to the people who've been here. It's folks who have been here and know all about this and know all about the league. First of all, y'all should be listening to. Second of all, we're talking about somebody who I saw it a couple times on Twitter. I think she sold out her book in like I don't even know how long, but it was mad quick. Okay,
Right.
she's been everywhere. She was just in Paris with like you can't tell me people don't know who she is and people won't buy.
She's on the Time 100 list.
She just made the Time 100 list. If you're telling me that she is not marketable, you're racist. And it's not. There's no bones about it. There's no. Thank you, JC, because it people want to talk around it, and it. I feel the same way about that Caitlin Clark presser clip with that disgusting freaking. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Whoa,
but I feel the exact same way.
Yeah,
I feel the exact same way. People just. I'm gonna get riled up, and I don't get angry. I don't get angry for you, Erica, but this is the type of stuff that just screams racism, sexism. You guys are not prepared, emotionally intelligent enough, generally intelligent enough to weigh in on what we've got going on the women's side right now. And so I'm all about gatekeep the game right now, like a lot of people on Twitter are, because it's driving me absolutely nuts.
It's insane. And I also saw people that I actually highly respect in other fields talking about, oh, well, why are we posting women's salaries? Women deserve better than that. And I'm like, fam, that came from the CBA. The CBA is public domain. Like, let's not fight wars on behalf of the players when they've already started doing things. The PA had an entire I think it was last year and I think maybe even the year before as well, where they have a campaign about transparency, and NECA has led that charge. So like people are making up arguments now. And I do want to get to the issue between now media and women's basketball, specifically women's basketball. Now, I just want to place this into context. There is an amazing 30 for 30, which its subcategory is part of the 9 for 9 on ESPN, as in Title IX. So using the Roman numerals. It's called, y'all look this up for real. I'm very serious. Let Them Wear Towels. And it talks about pioneering women in sports media that were not given access to the locker room because it wasn't a woman's place to be in the locker room, because men were going to be naked in there, because men talk about all kinds of apparently really vile shit in a locker room. Which anyway, that could be a whole nother subsect. I don't want to get off topic. Yeah. But anyway, but the conversation around that time was that there were women who were part of the media corps who couldn't file on deadline. And filing on deadline, for those who maybe don't know, is very specific to print media, because you have to put in a story. If a game starts at 7 Eastern or 7 p.m. local time, you have to get that story filed for most places by 11:45 at the latest, so that it has time to make it into the print newspaper. So just so you know that. So these women had to get creative with how to get quotes so they could do their job, because they were denied access to the locker room. I think it's important to have that context.
Very.
And we talked about it on the show before. Miss me with that we need locker room access. I would argue, especially at the women's level, but in today's, people aren't carrying a typewriter in suitcases these
Absolutely
days.
Not.
It's not the same.
You're live streaming press conferences. Like, come on. Be for real, guys.
So, and it was very interesting because I did a thing on Tuesday, and I might talk about that a little bit later, but yes, 30 for 30, Let Them Wear Towels. It's fantastic. But people are now having this conversation about how we need to be in WNBA locker rooms. I'm not of the opinion that we need to be. Do I see value of having locker room access at times, I'm not gonna lie, yes. One player I got to know her and her game because I spoke to her in the locker room. That was Beck Allen. I know a lot about Beck Allen's game because I spent time in the locker room when no one else was talking to her, and we would talk about the game or whatever the practice was, and then I would ask her, what are your goals? Like, how are we? And we would check in every once in a while. That being said, could I do that in theory at a shoot around if she's sitting on a chair after shoot around instead of being in the locker room? Yes. It's not the locker room is not a magical place. I've tripped over tape. I've tripped over dirty socks,
It stinks.
shoes.
It smells horrible.
Like I've been in men's locker rooms where it's very uncomfortable because even though in most sports they have separation, even in the WNBA, usually if players don't want to talk to you, if I'm being honest, they just stay in the shower area because we don't go past a certain point in the locker room and we can't see beyond that part. But sometimes there'll be players, I've seen this on the men's side, where they'll come out of that space and they're literally just wearing it, no pun intended, just a towel. And I'm like, do I need to be here? Or they'll be barefoot and I'm wearing my street shoes. I don't know how people live, but like for me, I'm not trying to walk around barefoot where someone else is walking with their street shoes. So even like little things like that, I'm like, do I need to be here? Like, I feel like I'm imposing. Like, is this important? But the reason that locker room access, or specifically, or maybe more broadly, I should say, why we need to have a conversation about how all of this newness in women's basketball, how do we then make sure that we are quote unquote policing the right things? Because independent outlets, we get policed a lot. If I'm Erica working for CBS versus Erica working for Black Rosie Media, even though literally same person, same credentials, different access. And so I get vetted because of my outlet. And I get that to an extent, right? That being said, as an individual, I certainly hope that I'm more professional than to toss someone a heart and then to make a really like cringe-worthy joke when Caitlyn tried to like be cool about it and be like, oh yeah, sometimes I throw, for those who don't know, like a reporter did one of these, threw up a heart to Caitlyn.
Not the hearts on the screen. Oh my God.
Like, it was just weird. It was weird. And then when she's like, oh yeah, sometimes I do that to my family, like trying to relate to it, but also like not make it about him and her. And then he was like, well, if you do that for us, ew.
The issue for me, Erica, is it's that obviously it's why would you, with the privilege, I believe the reporter was with the Indy Star, if I'm not mistaken. You have the privilege to be let into this space, which, I don't know this for a fact, but I guarantee you that was maybe his first or second time doing an introductory press conference covering one as a reporter, right? But I don't know that for a fact, so let's scrape that from the record. But my point is, when you have the privilege to sit in on a press conference like that,
about it.
Yes, the privilege to sit in on a press conference like that, and then you go and make a predatory remark like that. I want to be clear about the words that I'm using, because the thing that really pissed me off, and excuse me, I'm on my soapbox now. The thing that really pissed me off is I saw a complex story. I saw multiple outlets have stories where it was a weird remark. It was a bizarre remark. The guy himself said it was an oafish remark. It's predatory. Let's stop trying to sugarcoat the language, because words mean things. She's what, 22 years old?
Yeah.
Dude is, I'll go Google. Let me not dox this man, but I looked him up.
He's not 22.
He's not 22. He should not be ever saying that kind of stuff to a 22-year-old. And I'm like, I wonder what this man's history is like. I saw a tweet today with screenshots. It's always receipts. It's always receipts. Screenshots of him being on some bullshit in other instances having to do with Lolo Jones, and just a couple of other instances where he was obviously on some shit that he should not have been on. And so it's very frustrating to me as somebody who is, currently in real time trying to break into this industry as, and make my own mark and all that kind of, for people with that kind of privilege to walk in there and be on some dumb shit like that.
And we'll get credentialed again.
and we'll get credentialed again. Absolutely, absolutely. His oafish apology, it's gonna be, oh, hey, you'll get him next time. And I don't know this man personally, and so hey, it is what it is though, and this is exactly how I feel. So we need a reckoning for how we handle the boom that's happening in the women's basketball space.
And I think, there are some conversations that the WNBPA is wanting to have. I know because, again, I mentioned it briefly, and I don't really know. Let me just say that the conversation wasn't recorded, but there was a conversation that the PA has started to. I'm hoping that it won't just be a one-off, but I hope they continue to facilitate conversations between agents, players, and media. And this is a part of the conversation. And there were two key things that I mentioned when I was on the panel. One is that we keep saying more is more. I used to work for someone who was like, well, more is more, and I'm like, more is only more. First of all, I said, who created more? Black creators, specifically Black women creators. We've created more because y'all don't put us on staff. Yeah. You weren't taking, our Twitter and Instagram stuff seriously several years ago. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, when you realized that that was the wave, then you were taking our stuff. I have had WNBA teams, maybe even one that I host a podcast about in the past, take my work and slap it up with no attribution, with asking for no permission. This has happened. We've had to fight this fight. I've had to fight it personally. I know other creators that their work, you probably follow their work, have had to fight publicly and privately, having our things misappropriated, having our content quite legitimately stolen and put on larger platforms with larger numbers at the time than us, with no attribution. And then again, we don't get hired for these places. They take our work, they take our ideas, and they don't bring us in. So when the idea falls flat, it's not because it's a bad idea. It's because it wasn't executed with authenticity. So I talked about that. Another thing I talked about, and I really hope, and this is another thing, we have a writers association for basketball, but they vet, like they wouldn't consider Black Rosie Media, which is very interesting because the head of the writers association is the head of the next. So like, what is the difference? But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But they don't even recognize digital platforms. So someone that doesn't have a podcast, that doesn't have a website and is social only, they don't even recognize, like Janae or a Christina or an Anscape or a Highlight Her. They wouldn't even recognize those type of outlets because it's a writers association.
Yeah.
So it's already antiquated. What we need is I don't know if it's a full out training, but to have a baseline level of this in this space when we're covering the WNBA, this is how we operate. Because another thing is that some reporters are saying, oh, well, when I cover this sport or when I cover that sport, okay, but when I cover that league, okay, but every league does a lot of things different. Their rules are different. Their players are different. Their arenas sometimes are different. You could use that as a baseline, but like miss me with everything has to be exactly the same. Because if that's the case, then why aren't the salaries the same? Oh, but you want to hear about that. Why aren't the venues the same? If everything has to be like the MNBA, then why are we just seeing the Washington Mystics go back to Cap 1 while the Indiana Fever are coming into town? And why did we move them? Because here's another thing. People, I even have people like, oh, are you going to write about this? Are you going to write about that? I'm like, if you want me to write about the move, what I'll say is some teams, not all, but some teams in the WNBA were arbitrarily moved to smaller venues.
You speaking it now. We're there now because you showed from the outside where your heart was. You showed from the onsite that you didn't believe in the product.
Exactly.
That's just the
and that to me is the Caitlin Clark effect. To me, the Caitlin Clark effect is she is too undeniable. She is too undeniable for people to not pay attention. And they're coming into conversations that people have been having. They're trying to hop into fights that people have been, or debates. Let me not use the word fights because some people won't understand what I mean when I say that and take it literal. Debates. They're hopping into debates that they don't even bother researching. And they take up antiquated views from people who don't have enough knowledge about the situation, mostly men. They'll listen to what men say, but they won't research what Black Rosie Media is saying. They won't research what Highlight Her and Ari Chambers is saying. People who, as you said, Misha, are experts in the field.
Point blank.
Or don't even listen to me. I don't care if you listen to me or not. Go listen, go run back the tweets from Skylar Diggins from like 5 years ago. The pioneer. The pioneer.
If you don't listen to Skylar Diggins Smith, that's the thing. If you don't listen to, I mean, it's there. It's clear as day.
It's right there. So like you're looking stupid for no freaking reason, and you're just telling on yourself.
Yeah,
you're telling on yourself.
I think that there's an issue with, generally speaking, I think when it comes to people with smaller platforms with bigger ideas or wanting to break into different industries, not just the WNBA, I think, you know, everybody wants to jump on the next big thing.
Right.
The next big thing. Well, how about we start building from within with the foundation that's already been laid, that's been strong since 1997. Like it's not like I wonder sometimes, do folks just think the league has sustained this long just on accident? You know what I mean? Like the backbone of this league has been here, cater to those people and what they need and what they want. Stop listening to everybody else because you want to make a quick buck and then move on to the next thing.
Listen, we're going to have to do a deeper dive because unfortunately, Misha Jones, this ain't going away no time soon. We're going to have to deal with this all season. That's why this part of this was the madness has just begun. And I kind of hit on it, but the Mystics are the latest team, not to make it all about the Mystics, but the Mystics... You know, I gotta get that joke in at least 5 times an episode. But you know, the Mystics are the latest team to announce that they're moving to a larger arena. The first time the Indiana Fever, aka, or I should say, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever come into town. Listen, I no tea, no shade. I love this. There's a part of me that loves this. And I said what I said earlier.
Yeah, that stands.
Listen, hey, fam in the house.
What's up, Shea Butter FC? I love y'all so much. I love you.
Not fangirling.
Follow fam. I think you
not to make it creepy. Okay, first of all, listen, just in case y'all don't get that joke, yes, I'm making a joke, and we know we are family. We are legitimate family. So, okay, there we go. See, we just keep the receipts because I don't want nobody. I don't want nobody coming out here and talk about, well, why is it okay for y'all to toss up parts? Like, don't.
But when y'all do it, okay, yeah.
But like when y'all do it, okay. First of all, get on my face. No, okay. Just want to make that clear. We fam. Bam fam.
Are y'all related for real? Hold on, wait a minute.
Listen, you know what? We are within 15 shades of each other, so obviously we're first cousins. Like that's how blackness works. You ain't know.
Got you.
Let me stop. Okay, we really good now. Pocket now.
I mean, we were talking about the Indiana Fever game being moved.
Indiana Fever. There we go. Indiana Fever is going to be in every big market. You know what? The WNBA going to mess around and start putting Indiana Fever games at neutral sites just so they can get $75K. Let me stop. Could you imagine? Like, I would be here for it. And also, there's a conversation that needs to be had. But we'll see. We'll see how I want them to sell that thing out. So
yeah,
let's go.
I'm really excited about it. It was hilarious. I was actually talking to my dad this morning. We usually get tickets way in advance. Forgot to because we've both been busy. And so it was actually kind of a godsend that they moved it. So now they'll be opening up some more tickets. We'll get a chance to go. But
love it.
Capital One, man. That's where the Mystics started. It was MCI Center and then it was Verizon Center. Okay, let's be for
All
folks who've
right,
been
for the
here.
history, for the culture.
But it's just cool to see that the demand has gotten back to a point, even if it's just for a game that, it'll be back in Capital One.
Yeah, and that's the thing that knowing the history of the WNBA very specifically. Listen, I pulled some numbers about women's basketball for a story that I hope will see the light of day. That's a whole nother story. But I've looked at the numbers for women's basketball, specifically in the NCAA. The numbers that we're seeing surpassed in this year's women's basketball tournament, they are extreme if you look at recent history. If you go back to when Cheryl Miller was hooping,
It's a little different.
I mean, let's just put it into context. In the 1980s, when the nobody watches women's basketball crowd was, in their infancy, so arguably women's basketball had less of a following and less of a runway in the 80s than it does today. Cheryl Miller, even listen, a Kim Mulkey with them pigtails.
Yup. And the baseball jersey.
And a baseball jersey.
The warm-up shirt.
The warm-up shirts. Oh my gosh.
I'm geeked, but I want to bring those back actually.
Oh my gosh. You and no one else. Listen, those numbers in the 80s, Cheryl Miller is up there 3 times in the top 10 all time. Kim Mulkey, 2 as a player, 2 as a head coach. Caitlin Clark is in 4 of the top 10 because those are the most recent all time, not just championship games, all time games. But it's wild to me how women's basketball was hitting millions in viewership. 10, 11, 14 million in viewership in the 80s. And then what happened?
We know what happened.
I mean, I specifically know what happened, but given who I work for, I'm gonna let y'all put some pieces together. I'll say it this way: a 3-letter organization that has kept their men's basketball rights had the women's basketball rights and then didn't renew them, and then a 4-letter institution took over, and they're just now getting some of those numbers. And another thing that is wild is because everyone's always talking about, we need rivalries, we need superstars. Do you know that UConn and Tennessee only show up once each in the top 10 and not against each other? So what we talking about?
Math ain't mathing.
What we talking about? But yeah, listen, we this is gonna have to be a long, an ongoing sermon. You're gonna have to come back to church to get more, because I mean, this is where we're at, and there's just so much misinformation right now. People taking incomplete narratives. I waited. First of all, SportsCenter be getting on my dang nerves because they said they had what was it? A sit down with Angel Reese and a sit down with Caitlin Clark. Now they gave us, I think it was Reese. They gave us the Reese one early, and I had to wait the dang near, like they waited till the last minute of SportsCenter. I was like, I gotta watch this whole thing. So anyway, the Caitlin Clark one was at the end. And the monologue to open, this is immediately following the draft, the SportsCenter after the draft. The monologue from the rights holder started talking about her salary. So when we talk about where are these narratives coming from, I mean, I'm just saying the rights holder talked about her salary, but it was an incomplete. They said, imagine it was something like, imagine the best player in their sport taking a pay cut. And that's exactly what Caitlin Clark is doing. And I'm like,
that's where, I mean, that's the folks who set the trajectory of the conversation are the folks who, you know what I mean? Like that's a clear, the linear relationship. It's a, direct correlation.
And I was like, be better, ESPN. Like, that is misleading. You got her salary numbers right, because again, that's in the CBA. But to lead off with that she is going to make less money when her salary at Iowa was $0. $0,
It's actually incorrect. It's not good journalism. It is factually incorrect. Why do we keep parroting the same narrative? Like,
it's exhausting. But you know what? We are here to be the truth tellers. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to get into the first quarter. And so we're going to overview the draft. Now, this is interesting. Is it necessary to bring up salaries? Yes. Because equal pay day for women is, I don't even know when. I don't know when it is for white women. I really don't. But it's several months into the year. We're still not at equal pay day for Black women. And as a Latina, I have to wait till November for equal pay day. So yeah, we need to talk about money. That's number one. Number two, why would salaries not be on the table when the CBA outlines salaries? It's in the CBA. A bonus for being a first round pick, a bonus for being the number one pick, the bonuses that you get as an all-star, for winning all-star, for being all-star MVP, for getting to all of this is in the CBA. Why wouldn't it be fair game? Oh, are we embarrassed by the inequity? Well, welcome to the conversation that WNBA players have been having since the beginning of the WNBA. But not talking about salaries doesn't make the inequity go away. If anything, it helps to perpetuate that. We've created a society where people, especially women of color, queer people, we have our salaries and our salary history, everything from when you rent an apartment to then trying to find a job. Those things are systemically weaponized. See, now I'm not even talking just about basketball. Y'all gotta meet me, in some of my other, Twitter conversations about inequities and how it permeates through all of society, especially for Black women.
Yeah.
And women who happen to not speak English as their first language, not just Spanish speakers, but there is a stigma if you don't speak English good enough, which, I mean, there are people born in the US who don't speak good English, period. To say that someone doesn't speak good English because they're translating from one of the other languages, plural, that they speak from, like, come on, let's grow up. It might sound a little different, but did you understand what I said? I thought so. Like, so anyway, it is necessary to bring up salaries when we're talking about systemic inequities in our society, and we can do a like for like because there is an MNBA, and we can track the trajectory of where the MNBA was in their 28th season and where the WNBA is, and make calculations for things like inflation and cost of living. We absolutely can and should have those conversations, not to mention the WNBA players are doing that. So,
And Damien, it's not that we want to avoid talking about salaries. It's that we want people to stop being disingenuous and chiming in on these conversations from a place of their ego, as opposed to a place of wanting to support and help grow the league. That's the issue. People are disingenuous. People want to, have the last word, and people don't actually care about, what the mission is, and would rather, go off at the mouth than actually support the women who've been doing the work this whole time.
But I mean, whether you were talking about Caitlin Clark or overall, I mean, Caitlin Clark's in the WNBA, so I'm going to talk about WNBA player salaries. It's all the same. I mean, why would we? So is it just okay to not talk about Caitlin Clark's salary, but we have a conversation about Stewie and her Supermax? Or she's not at Supermax right now, actually. But anyway, we'll get into that because we're going to talk about the Liberty roster. So yeah, like we should be talking about salaries. And we talk about salaries on the men's side. We talk about signing bonuses on the men's side.
That's all we talk about. I'd rather talk more about the stuff on the court. Actually.
I mean, like baseball, I'm like, do those numbers even really exist? I feel like y'all are just making baseball's, I promise, makes up numbers. They are like the Major League Baseball and the US Treasury are the same, because they just be making money up. Making that money up. Like y'all don't even have that coin. You want to talk about credit? Like my New York Mets are still playing Bobby Bonilla. He hasn't played for a decade and some, maybe 2, right at this point.
So yes, the salary conversation spans professional sports. Yes.
Yes, it does. And it's wild on all levels.
Yes.
Like, we're just talking on the low end, but it's wild on the high end too. Baseball salaries are ridiculous. I can't count that. Nobody can count that high. No machine can count that dang high. I don't care what nobody says. Yes, I'm being hyperbolic, but the point is that's a lot of dang money.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby B bag is different. Exactly. Like, that thing is different. That thing.
I can't follow y'all there.
Okay, basically, Bobby Bonilla played for the New York Mets. I have to look it up. He did not play for a long time. He wrote his salary. Excuse me. He wrote his contract so that the New York Mets, he wanted this massive amount of money, and the Mets wanted him, and they had to figure out how they were going to get him. So he was like, "All right, don't pay it all. Pay this out over X amount of years." The X amount of years is literally decades. There's literally, like, it's like, okay, happy Bobby Bonilla Day. This man has not stepped foot on the dirt and the grass at Shea Stadium / now Citi Field in decades. Like, there are adults that were born after he stopped playing for them, and he's still getting paid. That's how much money we talking.
All right, Bobby B. Go ahead then. He turned 6 mil into like 80 mil. Wow. Okay. Well, I should have known his name. Apparently, my bad, player. I look.
You gotta know. See, we gotta. That's when we know the WNBA's made it. Someone makes a Bobby Bonilla and give me equity. That's what I'm talking about. That's when we know. That's when we know. Oh, whoops! I meant to do this one. That's when we know. It's crazy. All right, but we're gonna move on here. Let's talk about the first quarter. Now, the WNBA draft. I had a very different experience. Mish, you were watching the ESPN broadcast. So let's start with you. Okay. What were your expectations? Exactly. See,
did my face tell it all? I had none. I had none. I figured.
No expectations. I love it. Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah, it was. I knew, obviously, Drea and that energy that she brings, the energy that Aaliyah brings, the energy that, this crop of stars that we've, finally dug up and realized they're stars.
Come on.
Now that they were on the broadcast, I expected, okay, I'm gonna be into the commentary for sure, but I just wasn't sure what to expect, frankly. All in all, I was pretty impressed. I had a good time watching the draft. I had a good time listening, for the most part, to what was said about. I gotta. But I enjoyed the analysis. I enjoyed the pre-draft coverage. I thought that was so cute, having them out in the hallway. I think it's just a good way to show the energy, in that space for people who are sitting at home like I was. And yeah, it's just, I just wish that we, and I understand that this is kind of the nature of drafts for the most part, but I just wish that we, with only 3 rounds and only so many picks, had more depth about more of the picks. And frankly, that just comes from extending the time of the draft. And I don't, the people who make those decisions aren't the people with the mics in their hands. But yeah, all in all, though, I thought it was, I give it a B+.
A B+. Okay. Okay, I did not see much of the broadcast. So for those who were unfamiliar, and I know Brian and I talked about it on the last episode, but Brooklyn Academy of Music is a staple in New York City and obviously in Brooklyn. Lots of performances. I actually, through my grad school program at NYU, my specific school, we would have our commencement before the big NYU graduation. We had it at BAM. So the last time I was at BAM, I was graduating, which was wild. Yeah, it was really cool. So I was on the stage last time I was at BAM. This time I was working with CBS Sports. We also had our amazing photographer, Georgia Suarez, who some of you might know, actually talking about Shea Butter FC, does some fantastic work in women's football, aka soccer. And she was able to capture some moments in the auditorium, in the orchestra area, on the stage. And then the way that the draft works is, so once the player is drafted, you know that they go to Holly for that quick interview, and then they do a bunch of stuff in the back of house, backstage. And this is a literal backstage because this is a performance arena. It looked beautiful. It's iconic. The building's been around since the 1800s, but baby, it was hot. It was hot.
Oh, was it really?
It was hot.
It was a lot of bodies up in there, and that's
a lot of bodies.
This is the first time they sold
cameras,
tickets, right?
which means a lot of lights.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for every room, but if they have central air, it didn't get to the room I was in. We had that window open. I was like, listen, everything from a street rat to a pigeon could fly up in here, and I don't even care. Keep that window open. Like, it's too dang hot. It was hot. It was hot.
Dang. But I'm glad it was packed out, though, because
it was packed, because the first time since, was it 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. So there were several years where the draft was held at Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, all the way up in the cut. You're basically in Boston. It's like, go to Boston and then drive 2 hours. Yeah. So the first time that fans were in attendance, and I thought that part was really cool. I've been to an NBA draft actually in Brooklyn one time, and I've seen an NBA draft on TV. I mean, there's like iconic moments, especially in New York, who was it? Was it Porzingis? Was that the guy? I don't know. I'd be messing around. Daniel, you still here in the chat? Let me know. Did I get his name right? Yeah. But there was one player where the Knicks fans did not, like, they were not vibing. And like New York fans, they're gonna let you know. Like, you kind of messed up. Oh, is Brian here? Hey, yes. Hey, I didn't even see. Hey.
God, we're cute. Nobody told me. Oh.
You know what's funny?
This was the giveaway.
Yes.
So I don't even. I'm not even in the club. My bad.
I didn't even see Brian join the chat. Brian, okay, so you remember that draft, that Knicks draft, or that New York?
Yeah, I remember. And also, Misha, I can confirm that room was really hot. Like,
it was hot.
I text a friend of mine, Lucas. Like, the first thing he texted me when he got in there, this room is musty. That's the first thing he told me.
Yo, it really was.
I was like, it was hot. Like, it was like 80 degrees.
Yo, it was hot. It was hot.
Hot in there. They wound up opening the door, like, because the area was so weird. So, like, there's like a door like right to the side towards where the elevator is. They cracked it open around like 7, but before that it was closed. The fan wasn't on. Everyone's in there. Like, the tables are really condensed. Like, because I was trying to eat, I didn't wind up eating my meal until like draft time itself. Like, I wound up like shotgunning like steak and noodles and then running.
Not shotgunning, but you're right though, because I was like,
like the tables were like this. Like, the tables were like this.
Yeah,
so, like,
they had us up in there like we was on the A train at rush hour. Like, dang. We was in there.
I'm low key. Hey, I sweat too much. Y'all would. There's no way you would know this, but that wouldn't have been a good situation for your girl.
Bruh. It was wild. It was insanely hot. That being said, Brian, I want to get your thoughts, because I talked a little bit, or I will talk a little bit about the back of the house and the circuit and stuff like that. You were in the media room. You got to kind of see the vibes, the players coming in. What was the feeling? What was the vibe like to be able to hear the fans so close to where the media workroom was?
Yeah, I wound up, because, like, for the first 11,
it was Porzingis. I knew it. Yeah. They were so mad. Anyway.
Yeah. So for the first 11 picks, I wound up staying down in the orchestra level. So, like, the way they had it, like, the players were towards the front of the house, where players
were, like, on the stage. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the back, there was, I think one media section on the far right. The ESPN sort of hovered above in the middle. There was another section, and then on my side on the far right was where more media was. And a funny thing that happened, like, one of the guys who works for the league was starting to patrol who was in certain seats, because you had to be assigned those seats. So he was like, oh, this person is in this row. They're not supposed to be there. What do we do? And I'm like, my row was in row U. So I was like, okay, seat U. I'm good. I can sit down, relax, sit down a little bit. It's hot. Chill out a little bit. That works for me.
It was so hot.
Yeah, but in that area, it felt so great because everyone was so hyped up and there was so much great energy. And even during the commercial breaks, one of the her name escapes me at the moment, but I think she does like the hype things for the Liberty at Barclays Center during games. Yep. So she was providing like in-house entertainment. Ellie was there entertaining.
Yes, like all the love to whomever was in that Ellie outfit, because Ellie was walking around and I was like, just looking at Ellie, I was like, oh Lord, I'm about to pass out. I'm about to faint. You know it's hot up in there. Is there central air in that uniform? I want to know. Because if that's the case, I need me one because I was hot. But yeah, they had the hype crew. I think they called them. They didn't call them the Liberty hype crew, but
yeah,
they fly them in from LA. I'll tell you that.
When the timeless torches pull up, we know what time it is. Yeah, but it was really fantastic, and even in between there was some trivia. People like it was. I think the production side of it, just being in the lower levels during that time, was really top notch, and I think that it really sort of like gave a different energy to the building, because I think it's, Erica, you mentioned it, like it's such a different feeling when you have like people at an event. Like it's like it feels, I guess sterile might be the wrong word, but it's like when it's just you guys there, it's like just like players and coaches, things like that, and
Yeah, so here's what this is from our amazing photog. I'm showing this on the screen now, but this is what it looked like from the audience perspective. So you got the stage here. Let me get rid of this banner real quick. And then if you can see, there's some steps also. And the steps are they lead out to the tables. And I have another photo we can show of the tables, but yeah, it looks really nice. I think it looks really nice. Shout out to Georgia again, our photog, taking these. But so you see the stage where the commissioner was, and then there was a drop down and the tables for the players, and then in the orchestra is where everyone, including media, was sitting. But I thought it looked really nice. I think that it was really dope to have fans in attendance again. Of course, you had the orange carpet. Angel Reese, come on. These outfits were crazy. These outfits were absolutely crazy. Angel Reese doing it just like amazing. And then, of course, Caitlin Clark. Apparently, Caitlin Clark, the first ever basketball player to be dressed by Prada.
Proud of you.
Yeah, listen, that's iconic. It's a moment. If I had to critique, I mean, I'm not a fashionista, but you could tell that jacket was not custom made for her. I'm just gonna put it out there. And then like Georgia has some photos, but it's clipped in the back, and I was like, okay, we ran out of time. We were so close.
We didn't see that part. You just put her on blast. We ain't see that part, Eric.
I mean, listen, anyone who was there live would have seen because it was wild. But okay, let's talk about. I mean, we knew Caitlin Clark was gonna go number 1 overall. But let's now get into these New York Liberty clips, because I can already see there's some folks in the chat that are not really understanding. They don't like what the New York Liberty did. Not Ellie Law. I'm weak. Ellie lost 60 pounds.
Ellie was trying to make weight for a wrestling match. She had a WWE match after the draft.
Ellie and everybody else lost a solid 60. Solid 60. All right, Ronnie saying Cole signed some Greyhounds. I ain't talking about them buses. I'm weak. I ain't talking about them buses, some dogs, speed and athleticism. Davis, Sherrod, Laney. Now folks can't say the Liberty Guards can't stay in front of nobody. Now this is interesting because I think that some people, when it comes to the star power, maybe, or the charisma, see what I did there? The charisma, maybe it fell short. I mean, compared to Chicago, compared to LA, I mean, yeah, we looking a little pedestrian with some of these picks. That being said, it ain't always about that. And is this a New York Liberty team that necessarily needed that? Was that what they were looking for? We've been talking about it for the last handful of episodes. What do the New York Liberty need? So I'm going to go to you, Brian, first, because you are the beat writer here, and Misha and I kind of represent more national. So let's go to you. What were your thoughts on these picks? And let me run through them real quick. So you got Marquisha Davis at 11, Esmery Martinez at 17, Jessica Carter at 23, and Caitlin Davis at 35. No, those are not their ages. That's the number. Just to be clear, you
gotta be real specific these days.
Yeah. Listen, anyway. So, what are your thoughts, Brian?
I would say, I was thinking about this as I was walking earlier. I wonder if you guys are in the same wavelength that I am, because with the Liberty and when he mentioned Sherrod at the end, they're with all their picks, they're gonna have a full training camp, or maybe like 20 plus players this time around. They did the same thing last year. Like I remember when we asked, and he was like, "What's with the bigger camp this year?" She's like, now that this is my second year here and I'm fully here, I can like fully integrate and map out what I'm doing, and having more players you got your team to put eyes on, seeing how they work in situations is a positive. Right. And it gives you plenty of room to sort of keep building out foundations and maintaining connections with players across the board. So I think with just that part in mind too, there's a second part I'm going to circle back to in a minute, but as to the draft picks itself, I thought it was fine. Like, I think that having another perimeter defender is always a benefit. You have a young player who's like early 20s, someone who was all SEC. I think 2-time all SEC all defense, I believe, something like that. Yep. So she has credentials, and you have a player who's been in a tough conference in really high profile games coming into your organization. And I wound up asking her when she came up to press her later on, but like being in an environment where you're not tasked with being the savior of the franchise. You're not tasked with being, my team went from a championship 3 years ago to we don't know what's going on 3 years later. So you have a situation where you can just like come in, work without really any stress, because all the eyes are going to be on the starting five. So
Sandra, I'm weak. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So you have a situation where you can come in and just fully like learn without any stress. Like I think as a recent example, Niara Sabli last year, when she was drafted, she was a year off of injury and really trying to sort of like find her way again. And there really wasn't any sort of pressure on her. So she was allowed to develop and grow at her own pace, which I think paid off for her in the EuroLeague when she just had a really great run. So I think for the Liberty organization, just getting players who can just like learn in peace without having that pressure, I think makes things so valuable for them and allows them more room to sort of develop, gain that trust and experience with the coaching staff, really be able to sort of pick things up as they go along. So I think that just getting players like that helps.
Hey, we're getting these super chats. Thank you. Yes.
And also, this thought popped in my head. I wonder what you guys think of it too. Because Erica, you were in the room when Kathy was talking about we're adding, I think she said 48 roster spots over the next couple of years, whatever. So I guess I wonder, just in the context of a bigger draft camp and really making the most out of every draft pick, just making sure that you have eyes on talented players that fit your organization, because when November, December comes, we don't know what it's going to look like. And players that I think fans are used to now, they're going to be gone. Like somebody's leaving. Like one rotation player that you like is going to be gone by the time we get to 2025. Maybe two, because who knows what's going to happen when it comes to that. And then if there's another expansion team coming in, 2 more coming in, and if Kathy you guys had a great convo at the beginning. I feel like we could do like another hour strictly on the commissioner's press conference. So,
always.
Yeah.
And like the half answers we get.
Oh man, I was texting a friend of mine. Just a quick thing. Like she wanted to keep talking. And at the 30-minute mark, they pulled the plug. She's like, "That's it." And like, I was looking at the guy who's running PR. I'm looking at Ron. I'm like, "You see me? I have a question I want to get to." And then he's like, "Oh, that's it." I'm like, "Really, man? Like,
Dang, Ron.
Ron was not helping me out this time. Next time, he's gonna help me out.
Come on, Ron, come through. But I think the conversation about adding more roster spots, that's a nice way to package that. And Kathy is a very good public speaker. Like, whether you actually like what she's saying or not, it's extremely strategic.
Mhm.
So it's a good soundbite to say we're adding 48 roster spots. But what that actually looks like is what I'm most interested in.
Mhm.
Or however many, because 48 seems like, how are we adding anyway? But whatever. So I'm like, I gotta do some quick math, but also what? But so adding those roster spots overall to the league, sure, a good thing. And I still think that the depth of individual team rosters we need more depth there. We need more in roster spots per team, not just roster spots in the league overall. That's really where I think the WNBA needs to grow. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and.
Yes.
To your point, because we're gonna walk through the New York Liberty roster. I want to keep talking about some of the draft picks and use that to parlay into our second quarter as well. But I mean, I don't know if Shea Butter FC is still here, but anyone who's a Woso girly or Woso folk, like, I don't know, they be giving out expansion teams like Skittles on Halloween, exactly, like and the expansion drafts are wild. So on the one hand, it's great because there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot happening there, but as far as it makes things more difficult from a GM perspective, which also maybe in theory could create more parity, but it's also kind of it's pale, or it's a shallow it's a shallow way to kind of get that marketing if we're not ready to have more true competitive teams, which I do think means adding more roster slots per team, because I think the talent exists. Not everyone's going to be in this draft class Caitlin Clark. Okay? Not everyone in the NCAA can be Caitlin Clark, just like nobody could be, all of the other people that she passed in her lead up to her senior year, right? Pearl Moore, Lynette Woodard, Kelsey Plum, Kelsey Mitchell, Jackie Stiles. These are generational talents, and Becky Hammond, undrafted. Erica Wheeler, undrafted. You have to, the league and that kind of Cinderella type mentality, there's always going to be players that drive a team's success and that can even break through and be a league wonder. And that's also the excitement. That's that bootstraps that our country likes to talk about so much. Like you need to also have some of that. See, y'all know what I'm talking about. Like expansion, just like Skittles on Halloween, like, come on. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how we deal with that. But let's get into these draft picks again. So Misha, let me ask you this. Coming into the draft, from your basketball analysis expertise, what were some of the needs for the New York Liberty? And do you believe that there's some potential to meet those needs with either the draft picks or the overall roster? As Brian mentioned, this larger extended training camp, is it going to be a competitive enough training camp to slot in and fill some of those needs?
So first and foremost, I think if anybody's been here for a while, we've kind of been having this conversation for a while about, the Liberty's entire makeup. And I want to start by saying again, because somehow I think people forget this was the runner-up last year, people. This was the runner-up. So I personally thinking about that, I'm not going into this year's draft thinking they need to make a lot of big roster shakeup moves. That's not at all where my brain was at. It was the same thing we've been talking about, bolstering their bench
Yep.
And figuring out somebody who can work with that Sabrina Sloot tandem at the guard spot.
Wait, hold on. I want to pause for the cause. This comment had me
I was
rolling.
surprised y'all didn't see.
Cowboy Carter should buy a a W team. Ladies, please text her my thoughts. Now,
if I had her number.
Right.
Hey.
Would I tell you if I had her number? No. But also, I don't have her number.
Facts. I want her. I saw, and I know I'm not the only person to think this, but if Beyonce bought the Houston franchise and brought the Comets back, the world would shift on its axis. I think
we would have it would be 4Pete brought to you by Black Rosie Media. That would be the new podcast immediately on day one. We out here. We doing it. 4Pete brought to you by now. Okay, I want you to keep going, Misha, because this right here though is interesting because I hear what you're saying, and the New York Liberty, whether it's fair or not, in this marketing media race, I don't know that they added any gravitas to their alleged super team, moniker from last year, comparative to the Aces, comparative to Seattle. But also, I wonder, and this is where I think I feel that the picks for the New York Liberty were very Jonathan Kolb, very New York Liberty under Jonathan Kolb, very European, very strategic, very like character driven.
Mm-hmm.
The Aces, and I saw this a lot on social media, the Aces were somehow able to get Kitley, Martin, and Fair in the second round.
Yeah.
In the second round. What are some of the needs I see for the New York Liberty? And I think the New York Liberty themselves have talked about it. They want defense, particularly perimeter defense. I think that's valid. Mm-hmm. They need more athleticism and support off the bench for their backcourt. So were they going to go get a Kitley? I don't think the New York Liberty need size. Mm-mm. They brought in even some size. So Kitley, that doesn't make any sense. Now, Sherrod, do they need offense? If you put the right one point guard, well, if you put the right one as in the position one or point guard and backup point guard in place, then you boon your offensive productivity with Sabrina alone. Mm-hmm. And if you get a guard and a guard core at that one position who can also facilitate to the perimeter, then you also, to the post, then you also are going to increase your offensive output. You've got Jonquel Jones. You've got Brianna Stewart.
You've already got talent, man.
You've got that. And then if you find a guard that, like Sloot, can drive to the hole, penetrate, and then pass out, then that gives you options for Laney to shoot mid-range to perimeter. You even could get KT a little bit more involved shooting from that perimeter. So I think it's really just a few little tweaks here and there. Do they have to be superstars? The Liberty have superstars. So I hear you on that. But when you play this game, this media game, I think that's where perhaps some of the rub comes from.
Yeah.
That and free agency, Seattle has to be a team that the Liberty start looking at. Mm-hmm. If Chicago can get their pieces together, including with their top draft picks, Angel Reese and Camila Cardozo, not in that order, but that's a team now that the New York Liberty might have to be pitted up against. So I think it really amounts to what is going to be the stamina of the bench for the New York Liberty. What is going to be their stamina defensively? And I don't think that we can answer those questions, Misha, from one night, a draft and a training camp roster.
Yeah, I think, we got to let things develop here. And I also think, to your point about what we talked about, the athleticism and wanting to bolster that guard spot at, off the bench defensively and, be able to have somebody who can facilitate. I think they answered that question. It's not the sexiest pick in the world, but Marquisha Davis, Marquisha Davis was a great, to me, selection. You know why? Because what if we talked about with Sabrina? Yeah, okay, she can shoot the three. She might be a little slow on her feet getting to the rim. Okay, she might be able to do that. But what is she lacking? She's lacking that athleticism and ability to guard. What does Marquisha Davis do? Exactly that. And let's not forget, on Ole Miss's team this season, KK Arnold went down. She was supposed to be their point guard at the beginning of the season. Who had to pick up the reins and be a primary ball handler? Yes, okay, maybe they might have shared that role, but Marquisha Davis has gone through that first, training wheels year. And it hasn't been in the WNBA, granted. That's a whole different transition. Right. But I think in terms of that specific need, I think they filled it. I think Marquisha Davis has huge professional upside. I think, she's gotta get better with making reads. She gotta get better. All of Ole Miss team, in my opinion, I think got too many charges on them this year. It was frustrating to watch. But I think in terms of that, they got what they needed. I think Martinez and Carter, like you said, they don't need more size, but to get your eyes on prospects that might be in the WNBA pool in the next few years, there's nothing wrong with that.
Not Sandra. I'm so weak.
Sandra is insane. The lady's name is Sandy.
Sandra, I'm like, that's crazy. I agree with what you're saying. I think we're saying it. Ronnie also put this in the chat. What do some Liberty fans expect? Can't sign every sexy name, and IMO, in my opinion. The Liberty drafted the best player at number 11, and that's kind of what you were saying, Misha. This is interesting, though, Brian. I'm going to come to you for this because facilitation. I think I talked about that a little bit in my little rant, in my mini rant, one of like a million. But facilitation, I do think is important. What does the New York Liberty need for facilitation? I think they were pretty good when it came to assists as far as what their offensive output and assist ratio.
Yeah, I would say that their facilitation is it's excellent. And even off the bench, I was thinking as you guys were talking, having Kennedy Burke, I think would be a really good benefit. She, I think, all EuroLeague second team, so she's coming in off a really great stretch of basketball. And
I love that.
And even Ivana Dojkic, who was with Seattle before she left to go back to Europe last August, I think she wound up all rookie second team, something like that. But she did do well in her time running point in Seattle, even though the Storm had their struggles after they lost all their key players. But you still have that talent off the bench. And I think for Davis in particular, that burden won't really be on her shoulders because you have other people in front. Like, I think really the only time that she would really get those reps, if needed, is when the game is out of reach and the Liberty are up by a bunch. So she can sort of learn on the fly in that regard. Like, she's not going to have a situation where you're coming in, 5 minutes to go in the first quarter and, hey, you run the offense. Like, that's never going to be the situation she finds herself in. So I think on the facilitation side, I wouldn't put too much into that for her as far as like a ding against her, because you have elite players who can do that. And if all else fails, you could just have the Brianna Student and be like, hey, run the offense.
Yeah, she's got room to make mistakes, man.
Yeah. And I think that's what the important thing is. The core is there. Sandra, which is hilarious. This is so funny. Like, putting her whole government name out there is hilarious.
Sandra Bullock.
Not Sandra Bullock, but imagine if Sandra Bullock plays Sandy Brondello. Like, we need that yesterday. Do you think she could do an Australian accent?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know. She might. It might be like a inspired by. Woo! And inspired by. But I think this is where. Y'all know I don't agree with we need to get rid of Sandy crowd. And I don't think it'll happen this season, but this is where Sandy really starts to make her mark. And I think Jonathan is trying to give her options to really play around with. She focused, whether it was right or wrong, I honestly think she made the right decision based on what she was given. She focused on getting her starting five together, and it didn't quite pay off. But like you said, Misha, they were the runner up. They were in the finals with the Aces, and Sandy went all in on her starting five. So that crew is coming back. And she'll have a little bit more to play with. And my understanding, Brian, right, from what Sandy told us is that she expects to dive into that bench a little bit more. So going back to the deeper training camp roster, I also think this is going to be extremely competitive. And let's go to her hoop stats real quick, because I want to, take a little look at what we have here. So you have Stewie, right? You have Sabrina Ionescu, Courtney Vandersloot, Jonquel Jones, Benai Jelani, Kayla Thornton. I think it was you, Brian, that mentioned Kennedy Burke. We have Niara Sabli. We mentioned Marquisha Martinez Carter, Fibich, Dinka. There's so many names here. Sherrod. There's a lot to deal with here. Rebecca Gardner also could be very interesting. Maureen Johannes, we're not expecting. And we can also see Hanju suspended here. And, y'all know how I feel about that experiment anyway, but we move on. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what buttons are pressed here. Because there could be a lot of competition. With Gardner, you get some experience. I think underrated for what she was able to do with Chicago. Chicago offloaded a lot of things so that they could get what they wanted. And I think it was a smart move in a lot of ways for the New York Liberty to at least have that experience. And again, a defensive mind. To me, a lot of this is to shore up the defense. And I think that's smart. Because listen, defense wins championships, whether you like it or not. And the New York Liberty should know that intimately, because they got shut down in Game 4, which I still don't understand. I really don't. I still don't understand. But anyway, this is interesting. If Sandy Brondello fails this year, then it's over for her. First of all, what does failure look like? I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, I think that's a pretty stark contrast, getting to the finals and then not making the playoffs. I don't see that happening, but who knows? But again, we have to kind of see what failure looks like. I don't think she has that short of a leash. That's my opinion. But yeah, Jalen Sherrard can make this squad. You talk about greyhounds, aka dogs. This is what made Benai Jelani stand out and get an opportunity to be a key player for the New York Liberty. This is why Kayla Thornton was extended. That engine. And yeah, I do think the New York Liberty need an engine, a spark, in addition to some of the ones that they have already. But we talked about it. Stewie overworked early in the season. JJ overworked early in the season. Lainey always overworked.
24/7.
Always overworked. How long can you expect for those minutes to be that high, for the workload to be that high, and to have a sustainable team to where you are making the playoffs and are a contender to be in the WNBA finals, let alone win one? But you got to get to the finals first. How long can you do that by putting all those quote unquote miles on your starting five, which is why the bench is so important for the New York Liberty. So I think there are definitely some decisions that are going to be made here, but I'm expecting a very competitive camp. I want to go to what Jonathan called, and Brian, real quick, this is a genuine question because I'm not sure, I might have missed the email, but did the Liberty actually did they do any media on draft night?
Nah. Yeah, because I was looking for it, so I was like, did I miss it? But nah. Mm-mm.
They were like, no, we moving in silence.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is giving moving in silence vibe. They're like, you know what? We were super team all last year. Y'all wouldn't leave us alone. Now we're going to be super quiet, move in silence. Like, that's kind of what I'm feeling. That's what I'm feeling right now.
To that point, like I was watching you guys in the shoot around and talking about players who have a lot of outsized attention. I feel like the person who's getting the outsized attention is replacing our person.
That's how we open the show. That's how we open the show. I'm like, yes, we might know peace as New York Liberty fans because all the smoke going to Caitlin.
Our person has been getting heckled and harassed and fussed at for about 4 years. So it's like, oh, hey, there's a new person. We can just move it. Hey, we're not a super team. We're super friends. And we can go to work.
Wait, are they friends? I thought they didn't like each other, Brian. That's what I heard. That's what I heard in the streets.
Y'all are.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard the Aces say in their own in the Liberty House, that they don't even like each other. So I don't know. That sounds like some fake news.
What about your friends?
And I will
stand their ground.
I guess to the Liberty point, when they say something, they won't walk it back. So, yay.
Listen, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. Listen, we were throwing so much shade, and I'm here for it because I didn't appreciate that. I didn't appreciate that. There may have been a point to be made, but you put a lot of words together that were just disrespectful, or as JJ said, classless, which is hilarious. Then that turned on her, but anyway, yeah. We gonna let the past be the past. See, but this is what I'm saying. Moving in silence. We have a team that is, come on. Our starting five comprises of Sabrina. Now she gets a lot of attention, but she just gets it. She's not out here like really doing all that, in my opinion. She's not a social media darling, as in her own content. That's my opinion. So you got Sabrina Ionescu, who, I say this all the time, she shows up to work and then she leaves. She don't care. She don't be caring what nobody else. She's not worried about y'all. She's really not. Like, I just feel like, I'm not saying it doesn't impact her, but if someone was like unbothered, it would be Sab. Mm-hmm. Like, then you have Benijah. Unbothered.
Yeah.
Unbothered. Don't care. Mm-hmm. See you later. She will go hang out with little JJ, and that's gonna be that. And then you have Sloot. Like, she's so timid might not be the right word, but she's very introverted on the media side. She's not out here. Like, she'll talk to you at shoot around. She'll talk to you at practice. Obviously, as a starter, she's going to talk in media, but she'd be fine to just, show up and go home. She's not going to give you a lot of extra. We're not dealing with people who have a lot of hashtag content. So I really think this is the moving in silence era, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it because it was a lot for some. If I had to classify a decent amount of introverts or people who just kind of like to be more still than in the media. And so that put a lot on Stewie, who I don't know what I would classify her as an introvert. She's also gotten used to being the center of attention. And I think JJ could be one or the other. I think she's a little bit more expressive at times. It's with very specific things than some of the other players on the team. And that was still a very different season for her. So I think this is the moving in silence era, and I'm here for it. I am absolutely here for it. But speaking of, go ahead.
And speaking of JJ, she is currently, I think it's game 4 coming up of the WCBA finals in China. Like, I saw a really fantastic highlight of her finishing an alley-oop at the rim to get a game into overtime. And I guess to your other criticism about a player who won't be here, you can't get beat on a back pick by a little small guard and you're close to 7 feet. Like, you're big. JJ's not going to flare for 3. Like, JJ's excellent at the basket. So you can't let a little guard beat you. Like, Sandy taught you. Like, we're telling you, hey, play strong. Like, you had a great game, but just fight through the screen a little bit more and don't let JJ finish at the rim for an alley-oop to get a game.
I mean, y'all, like I said, y'all know how I feel about that. So yeah, y'all know how I feel. I've been calling it for years, but hey, what do I know? I don't know. But speaking of Stewie, we're going to take a little water break as our trio, but I want to head to Stewie. This is going to be, where are we? The third quarter. Yes. Team USA Summit. They had a media summit this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Wednesday, we heard from the basketball squad. We had 3x3. So the 3x3 team for the men and women actually has been announced. Very interesting because Ryan Howard on the 3x3 team. And so we talked about this on the last episode. If Caitlin Clark is in earnest a part of the conversation, what does that mean? There are a lot of really great guards. But Ryan presumably being out of the picture for 5-on-5, I think that does perhaps open the door for Clark. What that means for Sab, I think, could be very interesting. But before we hear from Stewie, I will say that Cheryl Reeve was also there representing USA women's basketball. And She's looking for Swiss Army knives. She's looking for, and I forget if it was Stewie or Cheryl Reeve that said this during, like, they had a panel and they were on the panel with Grant Hill, who's the managing director of the men's 5-on-5 team. But they all were basically saying that a USA basketball Olympic team or national team, you don't need to be a master in anything. You need more people that are a jack of all trades. And I asked Cheryl Reeve, what is she trying to get from her team? What is the way that she's going to make her mark on a USAB team, which has a very specific culture, which is, we've talked about that before. And she emphasized that it's going to be having a jack of all trades. For me, I do think Lainey, I'm always going to be Team Benijah for Team USA. I think she embodies that beautifully. I don't think Sabrina is a jack of all trades at all on the defensive side or just holistically in basketball. That being said, Sabrina, similarly to what DT can give you, she can be very influential and a jack of all trades on the offensive side. Diana Taurasi, not as great of a facilitator. So I give that mark and I give the edge to Sab or even Caitlin in that respect. Diana is just going to shoot. She's the one player that don't got to be a jack of nothing. She's a shooter. Everybody knows that.
She's there for culture.
Yeah, she's there for culture and to strike fear into the hearts of the other team. Because if she don't get a call, you getting slashed. So but I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But let's hear from Stewie. I think it's about 2-3 minutes, but this is Stewie at the Media Summit, specifically on Wednesday. And again, you can watch the whole clip. It was about 30 minutes. That will be up on Black Rosie Media.
I think that, the momentum behind women's college basketball, March Madness, obviously Caitlin, what she's been able to do and all the records she's breaking, and that carry over to draft night. I think that, and someone said this to me earlier, and I think they said it perfectly. It's like, we're not talking about momentum anymore. We're talking about, like, sustaining. And that's really what it should be like. Like, this is our standard, and this is where we need to just only continue to grow. I think it's the perfect time for it. So now college basketball is over, women's college basketball is over. Watch the WNBA. WNBA is going to go on a pause. Watch the Olympics, because there's Team USA, but there's a lot of other teams, great teams with great players. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a good way. I think it is a good thing to kind of, that people are kind of continuing to have a debate and create controversy. Was I surprised? Yeah, I guess yes and no. Because if you think about this question that's been asked on the men's side over and over and over again, it's like everybody's arguing in different directions. So I think that I'm excited about it. The one thing I wish is that in women's sports, I feel like people have this like want to only have one person have success. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, this sport is so huge that we can all continue to grow together, because on the men's side, I don't think they do that. And maybe that's because the media coverage has been so big that it's like they know what, like, LeBron and KD and Kyrie are all eating for breakfast. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like we need to widen our scope a little bit with all the players that we're dealing with, and that's understanding who each player is and the stories behind their. It's been incredible, and I think that's something that I'm really excited about, knowing that we're going to start this season. Training camp is 10 days away or something like that. There's been a buzz, and there's been a buzz literally in Brooklyn since the season ended, and like I see people on the street and bus drivers are like beeping their horn at me and like on the crosswalk. I'm like, what's happening here? But people are excited, and for a New York sports team to have success, and now the Knicks are playing really well also. We need that, and we want that, and I hope when we get to Barclays that we pick up right where we left off, so that we have 17,000, 18,000 in there from game. I think our game 3 is our home opener, so like from game 3 on, like we're ready to go.
So that was Stewie. I think she hit on a lot of really great things there, including one of my favorite things was she setting the record straight on we don't need one superstar in the WNBA. Misha, I saw you reacting to that.
Yes, because she's so right. I think, it goes to the grand scheme of things, right? We want to let cishet men take up all this space over here. And then when it comes to the women's sports, you get to have a star, but you got to pick carefully which one it's
Just the
going to
one.
be. You only get the one. Okay, you get one piece of candy when we go to the store. Don't ask me for nothing else. Like, are we serious? And I think the other part of her comment there was really important, and something that we touched on in the shoot around, I believe, Erica, is widening the media space so that we can tell these stories. Like the people who want to be involved and want to bring a voice to people, the shyer or more introverted, or whatever you want to call it, players who aren't always in the spotlight. There are people who want to bring those stories forward, but they're just not getting the opportunities to do that. And so I think all these things go hand in hand, but she's absolutely correct in that one of the things that's pissed me off about the Caitlin Clark effect and all that kind of stuff. Let me preface this by saying I love me some CC. Okay, I will be watching every single one of them games. Okay, I want that girl to be successful, but the fact of the matter is we've had superstars, man. We've got a league full of superstars already that should be getting the exact same kind of shine. Yes, CC has broken all the records. We understand that, but there are folks who are proven in a level above, in a tier above, on a world stage, who are worthy of that same kind of treatment. And I think Stewie is just getting to that point and hitting the nail on the head there.
There was
no, go ahead, Brian.
There was something really interesting that Stewie mentioned at the end, and I think it ties more to, I guess, to the broader conversation you guys had earlier in a Liberty context too. She mentioned for Game 3 onward, expecting 18,000 in Barclays Center. They opened up the full building a few times throughout the regular season.
Yes, talk about it.
And then in the finals, it was 20,000 strong in there. So they, even building off the success they had last year and how dynamic they are, and even just their continued work, just so like being engaged in the community off season. When the season starts and when they have that home opener on a Saturday afternoon against Indiana, another tie in there, you're going to have a full house, and you're going to really be able to continue sort of building on the success the team had. Because even last year, like, even when they kept the capacity to like 10, it was pretty much sold out every time out. And then we saw when they cracked it open, I think, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they set like attendance records in both games of the finals last year? So,
yes.
So it's there. And, God knows we need good basketball in Barclays Center, because during the fall and winter, it was not, it was not hitting. So real basketball is back in Barclays Center. So I know 20,000 of y'all was watching some stuff during the fall and winter. It was not things that I would condone watching. Because I had to watch for work. But you can watch good basketball. It's back in Barclays Center. This is what I've been waiting for. I've been waiting since last October for real basketball to be back in the clays. And the Liberty of
clays. The clays.
Yes. It's one of Kevin Durant's great contributions to New York City. I appreciate it.
Why not the bar?
I feel like the bar might be a little.
I mean, the bar is something different.
Yeah.
All right.
I like the clays.
You're right. Let me stay over here in DC.
Y'all call it what you want in DC.
Oh man.
Yeah, so
I love it.
Yeah, I love that, that's the goal that the team has, like really keeping that building open and really making sure that, because I think now I feel like my brain just jumped to this point too, like league business, when they went to Westchester, like I look at the I think it's across the timeline has the attendance numbers, and then the average was like, I think maybe like 12,000 a year, like 2017, the last year they were in MSG, and then 2018, you just see the nosedive in the overall attendance, and it's solely because they were in a really bad arena. up in Westchester. Now that they're back in a really high class, first class arena that has 20,000 people and they can fill it up, it's a situation where you can just build and really keep establishing the momentum that the team built from 2023 and the league has had overall. So everything is moving in the right direction.
I agree. And if you hear Rebecca Lobo talk about the times in MSG, again, you know, I talked about Cheryl Miller and some of the numbers that we're seeing. It's not that we haven't seen the women's basketball or even the New York Liberty on this trajectory. The trajectory was strong out the gate. It was sustained for a time. And then there are just some dark days in the WNBA. And Dawn Staley had this quote during the Albany regional, and she says that she also said, and I have to look at the quote in its full context. I don't agree with Dawn Staley most recently saying that Caitlin Clark is the sole reason for women's basketball growing. I think she's definitely the catalyst right now, but that's a conversation we can dive into. But there was growth. We saw numbers that, again, in women's basketball on the college side, numbers in the 80s, the early to mid 90s are still top 10 viewership numbers, and then fell right off the table. And so Dawn Staley says that women's basketball has been intentionally held back for so long. And there are things that are reported, and then there are also conversations for those of us who do reporting, who have background conversations with agents, with players, sometimes even with league officials, and you start putting things together, and there is to put it kindly, maybe just like a missing the mark. You know, the Luther Vandross, Jerry Curl didn't quite curl when it came to trying to get the WNBA marketing on the right foot. So we talked about the Welcome to the W commercials the other day. I thought the installment right before the draft was amazing, where it was kind of like this recruitment video, and it's like we're a welcoming environment, and it just shows like Asia Wilson just like smacking, you know, blocks and everything like that. You know, I think that they're starting to lean into the product, not having to chase the white, if we're being honest, male gaze.
Yes.
Because, well, we could talk about cultural differences. There's a specific white male gaze, which is, again, talking about greater society. Then there's the overall male gaze that kind of perpetuates basketball culture. The WNBA is starting to lean into its culture and its role as a driver, not just in women's basketball culture and basketball culture, Commissioner's Cup, but also in women's sports.
Right. When
the WNBA stands on its 2 feet, 10 toes down, as they say, imagine you go 10 toes down and all of a sudden you're seeing some of the biggest numbers. Let's not forget, we saw sometime, you know, year over year or event to event, the WNBA, since they started getting more national games, which happened during COVID, because nobody was playing, they were like, let's put the women out there and let them try to navigate professional sports during a pandemic. And women's sports skyrocketed.
Rose to the occasion, man. Threw women's sports to the wolves and rose to the occasion.
Truly. And that's because there has always been an appetite, dang near starved, for more access to women's sports, the WNBA being that as well. Now, the Caitlin Clark effect is that, again, we talked about this earlier on the podcast, the numbers are overwhelming now, undeniable now. So is Caitlin Clark is she the sole? I would disagree with how I understood Dawn Staley's comments to be, because it's not just Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but she's the one who's making it so that we cannot ignore this moment. That, I should say, people with the purse strings cannot ignore the moment that they've been ignoring, because the numbers have been going up for years. The viewership has been going up. The attendance has been going up. The business model has been there. The sponsorship dollars are coming in. All of this has been happening. And what has changed, in my opinion, and what I hope continues, is that you can say what you want about Kathy, But the one thing you can't say about Kathy is that she hasn't been laying the foundation. Her whole thing has been to move and operate in a way where the business model is solid, because now the numbers are there. So when you have the WNBA perhaps pulling away from the NBA, and I don't really know where that conversation landed, at least for this time around, but maybe the WNBA doesn't negotiate their broadcast rights separately for this time around. But Whoopi Goldberg works for the Mickey Mouse Network and called out ESPN for not giving a lucrative valuation on women's basketball. And she's absolutely right. Again, I know what she was saying. I think her comments lacked concrete evidence that she could have provided, and it made it easy to try to poke holes in it. But the sentiment of what she was saying, Brian, is absolutely on point.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I wonder what you guys think. I saw that Fanatics, there was like criticism about them because they're not going to have jerseys out until August. And it feels like with all the momentum that's been coming up. Yeah.
But Fanatics is a whole, they got big problems. But anyway.
Yeah, it feels like in this moment with all the foundation that's been laid before, all these sort of like, I guess, structural problems that we've been discussing over time, it feels like there's a greater magnifying glass on it. And it's a situation where now you have even more stars that have come into the foundation that's been laid out. You can really sort of use this moment almost as a push to sort of like, I guess, sort of shape everything in the ways that it should be. I wonder what you guys think of that.
I mean, I think it's kind of like I was saying, Misha, that it's like the foundation is there. Now it's like, put your money where your mouth is. I think, if I'm being honest, Kathy undersold or underestimated the WNBA at times during her commissionership, during her tenure. I'll be making up words. I'm good for that. During her tenure as commissioner, I think early out the gate, and she had to learn real quick. And to her credit, to some extent, she made that pivot. She's still, from a business perspective, maybe not exactly what the WNBA culture wants, but she's come in with a specific tool set. And I think she has utilized that tool set to the best of her abilities, and with no apology.
Yeah.
In the WNBA.
Yeah. And I also think, speaking of, like you just said, foreshadowing what the culture probably wants, I think it's time. Kathy, I think there's still much that Kathy can offer the WNBA. I will, let me start by saying that. I'm not calling for Kathy Engelbert's head. That's not what I'm saying right now. What I am saying is I cannot wait for the day that the W gets a commissioner who is truly a visionary about this league.
Yes.
Because there are risks that have to be taken when you're talking about a product that has not been believed in all of, truly believed in since 1997 in its inception.
That's
and
real.
that kind of had to come under the grandfather, the parental situation with the NBA, come out of that and then find its own ground. I mean, this league has withstood so much, and I cannot wait for the day that the person in that chair is truly 10 toes down, like you said, with the league, and about, all right, either you with it or you not. And it's gonna take, like I said, it's gonna take risk, but frankly, that's what the league needs. That's what any good business, at some point, you're gonna have to take a risk. You can't play it safe all the time, man.
Exactly. No, 100%. And I think that's where the bet on women from the WNBPA comes from, and I know Ari has been like, well, I think it's time to invest.
Yeah.
We're not betting no more. This is a guarantee slam dunk. Caitlin Clark, again, is the proof.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, not for everyone. Again, not for everyone. You could look at Candace Parker, Maya Moore, Asia Wilson, Stewie, DT, Sue Bird, Lisa Leslie, Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops. There's so many examples of quote unquote proof, but people weren't paying attention. Now Caitlin Clark literally has people freaking Googling and tossing hearts to her at a effing press conference. It's undeniable. It's creepy. It's hella freaking creepy. And liked the word you used earlier, and we're going to add that to our lexicon, predatory. We don't need to get into that realm, but the sensationalization, which hopefully will not veer into the predatory anymore at all, period. That is undeniable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I grew up in the 90s. So when you used to see, like, it used to trip me out. People used to actually faint. They would just see Michael Jackson and just fall out.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild to me. Like, we got people tripping over themselves over Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
And it's wild to me. Like, it's absolutely wild. But is the league ready to bottle that up into the next several negotiations? Is the league ready, and the Players Association ready, to do what it takes then to protect the players? We talked a little bit about locker room access, but there are other things that need to go into that. But the conversation I also think is important to have is that as things get more vetted, we have to also look through an equity lens and know about systems that have pushed people to the fringes of sports media and creating, or I should say, perpetuating policies that push Black women in particular and independent creators and make it as though we're the problem. That's not going to fly. That's not going to fly. So it's an interesting time. I think, to your point, Kathy, there's more for her to do. And we talked about this before, but if y'all haven't checked out Tubi, it's free, TUBI. Check out Shattered Glass, because in that documentary, NECA herself talks about she's talking about what might come next, and she's asking her family, well, what do you think I'll do next, or do you think I'll be involved? And what came out of her mouth herself is that she could see herself being commissioner of the WNBA.
That got me so hype.
And I had a conversation with someone, and they, speaking of women's soccer, I don't know if Shea Butter FC is still in the house, but someone said, first of all, Jessica Berman, if you don't know Jessica Berman as an executive, go check that resume. Working with the NWSL, similarly to Kathy, culturally had to learn some things, had to learn them very quickly. The whole Utah situation is very strange. Utah's getting a lot more love than I think they need to from professional sports, but that's more perhaps a political conversation. And there are things and systems that people like Jessica Berman and Kathy Engelbert can put into place that then, once you level that up, you make it undeniable, right? That Caitlin Clark effect. Then you can start bringing in someone who is going to have a different type of conversation from the player experience. And then we're not going to have players calling out ownership for predatory reasons. And let's keep it funky. This is a podcast for New York Liberty fans. We ain't got to look too far in the past to see that shit happening with the New York Liberty. Ain't nobody talk about that. It's wild to me how some of that got pushed under the radar. But, like, we got to have a real conversation at some point. Like, unfortunately, there was a very serious reckoning that happened in the NWSL. That's not to say that there haven't been moments that have needed to be rectified in the WNBA. And there are some names and there are some people that everyone in women's basketball knows I'm just talking WNBA. We're not even getting to NCAA because we talked about that last episode. When we continue to encourage and recycle people who have been predatory in the space, that's when you have someone who comes in, and then the players don't have to, the Brazilian players on the soccer side, I think it was Brazil, right? Covering their mouths because their federation continues to allow people who have, again, been predatory into their space. We need to take that responsibility off of the players. And having someone, I hope we do see NECA in the future, because those are things that cannot be a standard in 2024 at any level in any industry. Right. Let that go. Let that old boys club go. You see something, say something. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, we out here snitching on people who got no business, because they're just doing it. See, now I'm getting on my soapbox. The point is, I would love to see women's sports, and you do unfortunately need to look through the male gaze and the male sports business gaze. That's just the reality. I hate it. I think it's ridiculous. But when that is built, when that foundation is there, when the sustainability is there, and I think Kathy and Jessica are good people to do that, then you can bring in someone like Nneka. And the whole point of me even bringing Jessica Berman up is because someone said to me in passing, once Nneka retires, if she can learn under, I think she needs to learn from a different league. So I'd love to see her get involved somewhere else. And maybe it is under Jessica Berman and the NWSL, but learn a business model from another league, women's league or otherwise, and then come back and bring some of that back with all of the knowledge base that she has, being the president of the Players Association. Like, that could be dope. That could be dope. Still here. I mean, yeah, like, I don't know what y'all feel about Jessica Berman, but I think, again, she's got Kathy Engelbert vibes. I can understand why people don't like it. I also understand why it's necessary for this time right now. And when will we get beyond? So I think the future is bright. I also think we can't afford the missteps that we've seen in the past. Mm-hmm. We really can't. And so everyone's going to have to level up their professionalism. In that conversation on Tuesday, a lot of people talking about PR reps. I mean, Brian, you were there. We had a situation where the players weren't made available after game 4.
Yep. I remember the whole. Still, yep. I wound up like bookmarking the email they sent us about the media policy. So it's like, I saw that last week. Let me just save it just so I have it in mind.
Yep. And, there's a conversation to be had. How much access, what do you honestly get from a player after a tough loss? It's debatable. I mean, that's a conversation to be had, but we don't know if we don't have access to them, But what do we do as writers? Even if someone doesn't say anything, you can say things without saying something. Mm-hmm. And writers, we sometimes can convey that. Nneka told a story about that. I guess Michael Vopel wrote a story about after the Sparks won one year, and she was running around as they were doing, like the champagne and everything in the locker room with a shower cap on. And that's a very cultural thing for Black women, especially, and people with natural styles. And it's something that adds, no pun intended, texture to the celebration. It's being in that element. So, we have to think about storytelling, and that does help tell the story. It helps to humanize at times, and having that access is important. And we know that this is a league where players, again, have led the conversation regarding mental health and wellness. And it's really hard to sit and try to digest a loss while answering other people's questions about your performance. Mm-hmm. That's tough.
Yeah.
It's what we expect in sports, but that doesn't mean it's not tough. So what's the balance?
Yeah, like I was thinking, like one of my earlier, because like 2022 was like my first year on the Liberty beat, and I remember I have so many gray hairs, but I've been around the least of everybody. It's such a catch-22. But like one of my memories from that season was game 3 after they lost to the Sky, and in the presser, like Nash and Natasha Howard were just stone-faced, and I always feel sort of awkward having to ask people about terrible moments that happen to them. It's like, how do you sort of engage? How do you even like manage that kind of thing? And I think at least for me in the room, I just directed all my questions to Sandy, because I was like, they do not look like they want to talk to us at all. And I don't blame them. It's like, man, we were so close to pulling off a massive upset, and we lost in our own building. Like, we got everything back where we thought we wanted to be, and we still fell short. It's hard to talk, and it's hard to really sort of like be in that moment. Even for exits this year, they were mentioning that in the locker room, they were just stone-faced. And I think somebody said that, I don't think anyone said a word in there. So it's like, how do you sort of strike the balance between doing what you need to do and describing the environment, while also not prying and trying to sort of like get a particular soundbite out of a player? Because like, right. I think especially what happens is I think like players are human, and they know when someone's trying to sort of like fish to sort of get them to rile them up. Like, like players are super perceptive when it comes to that, and it does, and it has a sort of multiplying effect and consequence of, oh, this person is really trying to get me to get out my character, so I'm just going to sort of like shut down with everybody, and then it winds up having that unintended consequences for folks who have been around and know the players well. Like, you know, you can go to practice and then everyone knows who you are because they know that you're there. Like me and Erica can pull up whenever, and I say, oh, hey, you know, Brian will say hello to us. He'll get us everything we need because he knows what we do and he knows our character. And I think just to sort of circle back to the beginning during shoot around, it's a situation where if you're coming at it in the same ways that they do for like NBA talk, where it's just like nonsense kind of things, and it's kind of things where you're just like trying to like drive debate or whatever, like you're not really doing anything helpful, and it makes everything worse as a consequence, and no one's really getting anything fun. Like there's this discussion and sort of like broad piece about how women's sports are becoming men's sports now, and I see people complain all the time about men's sports coverage. Like I watch people every morning. They're like, why don't they talk about X's and O's, all these kind of things. And now you're like, the WNBA should be like how men's sports are in media coverage. And it's like, no, you don't want that.
No, that's not the gold standard at all. It's a terrible place. And again, that's where the balance is. But, you know, we've been talking for a minute here. We didn't even really get to all of the listener comments. I think there were a few that maybe we can circle back to. But I think this is one that I think is going to be, I like the last part of this in particular. When it comes to the New York Liberty, it really has to be the starting five ready to go out the gate. We talked about it earlier. It's going to be predicated on Sandra being able to really focus on the reserve players and getting that core ready to go, having, you know, no pun intended, but the aces in places. That's what's going to be required for this New York Liberty squad. A lot of people saying, you know, aces three-peat. I mean, we'll see. They're looking pretty good. Even their draft players that they are likely not even going to use are, come on. Becky know a thing or two about a thing or two. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything pans out. But we're going to continue this conversation. Make sure you're following Black Rosie Media. Again, Georgia did a great job capturing some behind the scenes content. So we're going to have that up. We're going to go around the horn. Misha, I know you talked about it at the top of the show, but what else should folks be looking out for when it comes to what you got going on in the space?
So ways to win. Again, I'm gonna shameless plug. Gotta let y'all know. We talked this week's episode with Tamika Catchings. We talked a lot about the Caitlin Clark situation and her transition to the league, and you know what Tamika's was like, and comparing that. And we've had a lot of women's basketball heads on. We also actually had Grant Hill on. I forgot to mention.
I love Grant.
Yeah, we had Grant Hill on, the managing director of USA men's basketball 5-on-5 team. But yeah, that podcast is going strong. I'm trying to see if I'm gonna do a Mystics situation for this WNBA season. Just a little, you know, it's not gonna be as official as Black Rosie Media. Okay, don't expect too much out of me, but I might throw together a couple little videos over the course of the season. We gonna see. I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, let us know. We'll circulate it here on Black Rosie. You know, you fam, so we got to do that. Brian, what you got coming down the pike?
I found myself in a situation again where I have assignments I need to get done, but they're not done yet. I interviewed Banasha Laney last week at a Liberty event in Chelsea where she was doing a food giveaway. I have a story about that eventually coming down the line. I promise I'm going to get it done. And then I have another story where I myself and a lot of other reporters interviewed Courtney Vandersloot at Hospital for Special Surgery when she went to visit children in the pediatric ward. I have a story about that coming too. I promise. It's coming.
I love it. I love it. And with Black Rosie Media, again, you'll see the full Brianna Stewart clip. Also on the audio side, check out, Gotta Get Up on audio only, because that's where you'll hear a little bit from Cheryl Reeve and the aforementioned Grant Hill, some clips from the Team USA Media Summit. And we've got less than 100 days. If y'all don't know, Black Rosie Media will be in Paris. So excited for that. We'll have some coverage coming to you live from the basketball tournaments. But we'll first start that off, of course, with Stewie and hearing what she's thinking about this USAB squad. They're not going to have another training camp, so we're just going to have to wait until Phoenix to see if Caitlin Clark becomes a part of that USAB team. But for Misha and Brian, my name is Erica L. Ayala. You've been listening to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans as part of Black Rosie Media. Now is the time where we awkwardly wave until the stream stops. Have a good night, everybody.